This is episode 0040. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're in our 40th episode, and today we are privileged to have Elle Edwards. Elle Edwards is an irrepressible silver lining spotter with a compulsion to say the stuff most people will only say in their heads. And so, just on the basis of that, and the fact that she is somebody who has embraced this concept of being a Youier, something that she claims will change you forever and help you to move closer in your relationships, in your day-to-day joys and happiness, as well as your day-to-day work. We have invited Elle to come on board today to share with us her joys, her happiness, and her concept of being a Youier. Now, one of the things that I want to do right off the bat is I want to talk about the concept with Elle about you are what you think, and also how you can be an irrepressible silver lining spotter, Elle. So can you tell me how you define these and how you go about it?
You are what you think. Well, first of all, I should just say hello and thank you for having me. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. But you are what you think. They totally play together. We were talking about this, obviously, in our little pre-party. But let's start with the second one first, because this is actually the easiest. Because I had a wonderful conversation a few years ago with a dear friend and was able to identify 3 words that you can practice using every day that will help you be a silver lining spotter. It's super duper easy. It does take practice, and that ties in with the you are what you think piece. We'll get that in a minute. But the 3 words are but, at, least. So say like something happens in your day. I always use the example of the dog being sick on the carpet, because this actually happened when I was recording a podcast episode with a friend a year or so ago. The dog came in and was sick on the carpet. And I said, okay, the dog's being sick on the carpet, but at least it's only like foamy little bits of sick. There's no like lumpy bits in there. It could be a lot worse. And yes, we did keep that in the take of the podcast episode, because your brain likes to fill in the blanks. And so if something happens on your day that's a bit irritating, you say, okay, this thing has happened, you acknowledge it, and then you say, but at least, and then you wait and you let your brain fill in the blanks and with what comes up next. I always like to give the caveat that this is for those day-to-day irritations, those things that can like be annoying. We're not talking about tragic, awful, horrible moments. And I say that because, you know, my hope is that none of your listeners have anything tragic happen today. But like, let's be real about life. Stuff does happen. And I wouldn't want for 1 minute for people to think that you can just silver lining spotter your way through, like, I don't know, death or, you know, cancer and all the rest of it. I do find with the benefit of time that there will be, I don't want to say silver linings, but you can get through those things, obviously. But this is really for those day-to-day irksome things like the dog being sick on the carpet, or, I don't know, your favorite jumper coming out of the wash bright pink, although I love pink, but you know. But you need to practice it. And this is where it ties in with the you are what you think. Your mind is amazing. And the way that it's wired, the things that you focus on, your mind, I don't know how much you know about brain science, but there's a collection of neurons at the back of your mind called the reticular activating system. And they do loads of really cool things. They regulate your temperature and all the rest of it. But for the purposes of you are what you think, they act like a filter. And they filter in those things that your mind thinks is important. And I can see you nodding along there. But so this isn't new to you, is it, Gary? But that's okay. In case it's new to one of your listeners, we'll keep going, because it's that example of, imagine you're out and about doing your day. The classic example is, as a woman, when I found out that I was pregnant a long time ago. My eldest is now 14. My youngest is 14. But when you first find out that you're pregnant, or somebody that you love is pregnant, all of a sudden you start seeing people with pushchairs all over the place. And it's not like there's suddenly been a massive baby boom in your town. Your mind is filtering that stuff in because it thinks it's important to you. But you can hack your brain, and you do this by consciously thinking. So another example, say like you start your day and you spill your coffee. You've got 2 choices. You can either say, oh, well, that's it, my day is ruined now. Guess where your mind is going to go? It's going to continue to make your day awful. Or you can go, oh, well, it can only get better from here. This actually happened to me. I think it was one time last year. I dropped one of my children off at school. They're all teenagers. And so they They go from school to the little shop. My daughter tried ringing me several times. I missed a call. It was all quite traumatic. And this random stranger, bless her, had let my daughter borrow her phone. When I spoke to her, she said, oh, see, this day is terrible now. And I said, no, it can only get better from here. And I thought, no, I'm going to practice this. And I did. The day did get better. And so the more that we practice, thinking being aware of the thoughts that go through our mind, looking out for those lovely moments, because I often maintain that actually day-to-day joy and happiness, it's not reserved for those big occasions like your birthday or when you go on vacation. The secret for day-to-day happiness is to find those delightful moments that just happen incidentally. Like I'm looking out of my window now and I can see there's a vase of flowers on the windowsill. They're lilies and they've just opened up and they smell amazing. And I love them, they're brilliant. And those random little bits of joy. So going back to the 3-word hack, the more that you practice this, the easier it becomes. And I know some people find it easier. Some people seem to be with a built-in sense of like, Eeyore, oh dear, this is the day. But even those people can practice. It's a choice. You can practice looking out for those things. Sometimes you need a bit of help. One of my children tends to be a bit of an Eeyore, and so we do tend to have to help him out a little bit. But you can absolutely practice this. And the more that you practice it, it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Oh, do you want a real-world example? Like the other example.
Take it.
The Facebook algorithm is the other example of this. I reckon that the Facebook algorithm has copied our brains, because you know how like everything, if you were to be shown in your Facebook newsfeed, every piece of information that gets shared by people, you go crazy. So instead, they filter stuff based on what you like, you comment on, and you interact with. And your brain did it first. Your brain filters things in based on what you like, you notice, you comment on. And so I love the Facebook reminder of that, because it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's totally how it works. And it, like I say, with practice, it definitely gets easier.
So tell us more about what you think getting the outcomes based on all of this.
Because the more that you focus on, say for example, like one of the questions that, as you can imagine, prior to podcast, you send questions over. One of your questions was about failures, right? I find it always really hard to have an answer to what was your biggest failure, because as a silver lining spotter, I see everything that goes wrong as an opportunity. And you could argue that, yes, I've been very, touch wood, that's very superstitious, but like nothing terribly awfully tragic has happened in my life. I've had a miscarriage and, we've mental health, day-to-day stuff, but I can't pinpoint one really tragic, awful thing that's happened. I had a delightful childhood and all the rest of it. But that said, I maintain that even those things that go wrong, so like, for example, the work that I'm doing now with Youier and the Itchy Soul Playground, this idea has been bubbling around for like 8 years. And I've tried it so many times. And I probably think, actually, I have 2 ways of looking at this. I don't know if I was necessarily ready 8 years ago. I wasn't the person then that I am now. So I think actually maybe I was being spared from my own success. If it had been brilliant then, it would have been a complete nightmare. But at the same time, we need to learn and grow into those moments. So even those failures aren't really failures. They're only failures if you don't get back up. Otherwise, it's just a plot point. These things that go wrong. So to go back to this what you were asking about, successes and you are what you think, the more that you can practice and get good at focusing on, okay, this thing went wrong, but what can I learn from this? Or how can I grow from this? Or, how do we move forward from this? The more powerful that can be, because the worst thing you can do is be defeated and just give up. This world needs everybody to show up and be the people that they were made to be. And together it makes the world a more delightful place. And so if you can practice that and actually, have your mind and your mouth line up, so people quite often, if they meet, we talk in this sort of context, and then if you were to meet me in like real life, like outside my house, I'm exactly the same person, and when people read stuff that I've written on the internet, they're like, oh, I feel like I know you. It's like, well, yes, because I'm just me. They have to have that sort of lining up between how you're processing the world and showing up, and then what that looks like speaking it out as well.
There's nothing more important than being congruent between what you think and what the words you say are. I think the world is tired of being manipulated by people who say words that are not in alignment with how they really are thinking. That's what the world of advertising seems to be all about. But when we share, from our heart,
Yeah.
There's a vibration that comes through, that people can feel the truth of our words. And that's when people say speaking truth to power, etc. The heart, the congruence of our words and our vibrations, our intentions are all in alignment. And I think this is, this is such an old concept. You go back to the Hermetic philosophy, they just constantly say your inner world, what's going on inside you is what's going on out there. And when you want what's out there to change, you have to change what's going on in here. So you have to change how you're thinking, how you're feeling in order to make your words come out to change what's going on out there. And that can go back in time and say, well, the Hermetic philosophy was developed about between 3,000 and 4,000 years ago. Great. It's older than that, actually. But but the thing is when people like Christ said, as a man thinketh, so is he. Everybody understood it because they all knew the Hermetic philosophy. They all knew that it was out there. That's what was on there. So we can talk and we can say anything we want to say, but our words, when they're congruent, they are full of value. Why would you want to waste time giving valueless words?
And the other way it plays out as well is I think it's not until you're in those pressurized situations. They give that example of if you're carrying a cup of coffee and someone bashes into the cup of coffee, coffee's going to fall out, isn't it? And so it's easy when you're having a good day to show up with this great, I'm wonderful. This is a great day. It's only actually when you're in those pressurized situations, how do you react? And where is your heart really at? We see that when you actually show up and are in those pressurized situations. But you reminded me as you were saying that as well, is one of my frustrations with social media. I love social media for the connections and all the rest of it. But one of my frustrations is there has been, as you kind of alluded to, this tendency to move towards authentic. But have you noticed, Gary, that even when people are being authentic and they're showing you their mess, it's still a filtered mess? People who show you their messy desks, for example, they're choosing how much mess to show you. And actually, there's a quote which I always slaughter, so I'm not going to try and properly say it, but it talks about how, you mustn't compare your backstage area to everybody else's front of house. And so it's easy to think, you see other people say, oh, this is my mess, right? And you see their mess and think, oh, but you know what the mess is like inside your head. And you think, oh dear, my mess is so much messier than their mess. And if you don't realize that their mess is filtered, then there is this whole comparison thing. And then you think you're a completely failing human being when the reality you isn't. We're all just making it up as we go along, doing the best we can, ideally with love and joy, but nobody has it all together and has this perfect, way of doing life. But unfortunately, social media, unless we're aware of this, can make us think that things are, what should I say, not quite how they are.
I agree with you. And sometimes I think we have received really good advice in the past about not judging. Don't judge other people. You're going to be held by that same standard, etc. But really, we're judging all day long.
Oh, totally.
And everybody does. And when we really should just be applying discernment, we should be just sitting there. Is this the kind of person I want to attract, or is this the kind of person I want to distance myself with? I just recently had an interview with E.A. Solkovit, who has a wonderful concept. He says, we love everybody. That is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to love everybody. We dislike what they do. And we have to sit back and say, these are the kind of people I want to get closer to, and those are the kind of people I need to stand back from. And the only person that, if you are to judge at all, is yourself, and not today's self, yesterday's self against today's self. And look, was there improvement? Because the idea is progress and not perfection. It'd be lovely to reach perfection. But the last time that happened, they killed the dude,
That's so true. So true. But also as well, I think there's a balance there, because I think we are called to love everybody. And I've been nudged over the years where there's been someone who I find challenging, shall we say. And I say, okay, God, help me see this person through your eyes. And that changes stuff. So if you ask for us to see people through the perspective of heaven, And I know not everybody listening will have the same relationship with God. And so I think it's important to say that I'm not going to get off the tangent of how God's been perceived over the years. But all I like to say, I don't want people to get hung up on this word God. Ultimately, if we agree that God, love, the universe, whatever word you want to use to describe that being bigger than yourself, you can say to that person, that being, to who I call God, help me see this person through your lens of love. Because we're told God is love, and that is, regardless of all the other characteristics that we like to harp on about, he is love. And we're all made in that image of love. And so if we can ask and practice, okay, there must be something loving in this person, even if they're really doing my head in right now. But you said it, you can't change other people. You can only change yourself. So even those people who we find frustrating and maybe challenging, okay, help me to see this person through your eyes now. What do I need to do? What do I need to change? How do I deal with this person? And sometimes it's about having those boundaries. We can love everybody, but we don't have to let them all into our inner circle. And it's that discernment piece that you talked about. It's very easy to think, oh, I've got to love everybody. I'm going to love everybody. But yes, okay, but you don't have to let everybody in all of the time. I was about to say I don't tell everybody my secrets. I don't really have any secrets. I tell the world pretty much everything. But having said that, though, some of my stories aren't just my stories, they'd be my family stories. And it wouldn't be fair for me to give stories publicly that relate to my husband or my children. I call them children, they're all teenagers, one's an adult. So even then it's filtering, but I think it's a balance, and we can do both of those things. We can love everybody and see people through that lens of heaven and that made in the image of God piece, even when it's buried a little bit deeply sometimes, but still also not be a doormat and find ourselves getting burnt out and completely boundaryless. I don't even know if that's a word, but you know what I mean.
I think one of the things that sometimes is missing as entrepreneurs and businessmen and leaders, even self-improvement people, is we sometimes forget to realize that every person we come across is a person of value. Oftentimes they have forgotten what value they have or what they bring to the table, but they still have value. And we all have stories about people who don't seem to have any value, who do something quite heroic or do something extraordinary. And after that point, people reverence them. But oftentimes they're no longer around. They're not there to enjoy the fact that they brought value to people's lives. And we are, as employers, as leaders, as self-improvement people, we're oftentimes under a calling that's never been really quite issued to us to help people find the gold within themselves, help them to see the vision of who they can be. And once they understand that, we just stand back and watch them explode, because when they have the understanding of their own value, their own talents, their own gifts, their own contributions, they want to increase it. It's almost a phenomenon of watching crystals grow, because you just have to have the basic material there, and then you just add more medium and crystals get bigger and bigger and bigger. And and that's what happens with these people. It's kind of like, once you've uncovered the crap and you let them get the vision of who's really here, it's amazing how the crap begins to disappear, and they become who you're really happy to know.
Yeah, who they were always made to be all along. Like, that's one of the, I said earlier on that Youier had been around for 8 years, but one of the pieces that has been relatively new in this journey is realizing, identifying, there's so many like, who am I questionnaires. We do this, there's a strength finders, there was, like, from a church perspective, there's spiritual gift tests, there's a quiz on Facebook, which Harry Potter character am I? Everybody has this journey of wanting to find out, who am I? And actually, part of what I do with is as I was given a superhero name 2 weeks ago of the image bearer. And it was this picture of holding up the mirror. Okay, this is who God says you are. Let's stop all the quizzes. Let's stop all the questionnaires. And actually, let's go to the source, the creator, and ask him who he says you are, and dig into who it is that you're made to be. So like you said, so that you can then blossom. And that's why I maintain it is the secret, in inverted commas, to thriving in life, to better relationships, is actually, if we know who we are and we know whose we are, and we can stop fighting against trying to be something else that we're not actually meant to be, we have an inner peace, a contentment, and it also helps us love other people better. I know, for example, that my husband, I'll be quite honest, I'm not very neat and tidy. I like having a neat, tidy house, but I'm not very good at cleaning. I get distracted. I know that my husband, if he comes home from a long day at work and the house is nice and tidy, that it makes him feel loved. And so one of the things, not every day, I'll be transparent, but like at the end of the week, I'll go, okay, let's have a little run around on a Friday afternoon. Because I work from home and I can dictate my own time, I'm going to run around so that he can come home to a nice, tidy house, because I know it will help him feel loved. For somebody else, that would have, maybe they wouldn't even notice. But because I know who he is and how he operates, it allows me to love him better as well. And so the more that we can embrace that, because you probably haven't seen this story. There's a story on my website of me in my mid-20s when I was and I was miserable and angry and frustrated. And thankfully, my children were young enough at the time. They don't remember angry, grumpy Elle, but I remember this feeling of pent up rage. And I was trying to be this perfect mum and wife figure of what I thought it looked like. So that, because all I ever really wanted to do was fall in love and get married and have kids. And so I have more ambitions now, but then at the time, that's all I wanted. I just wanted to be loved. And how many of us want that? And we just want to be loved. And so I had this idea of what this box looked like. And it was a really difficult box. Like and haven't been diagnosed with ADHD, but I'm quite sort of ADHD, like, I have all these ideas and trying to fit into this box of normal, it was driving me crazy. And so it was only actually, I had this, it's a story for another time, but I had this big coming to Jesus moment with this radical encounter with God's love and realize that I was loved just as I am, and I didn't need to try and be normal. It was like the difference between night and day. And so the person I was then versus who I am today, you wouldn't have recognized me. I was like a different person. And it all came back to being who I was created to be all along, embracing my quirks and my foibles and my eccentricities, and just showing up, saying sorry when I make mistakes, because we don't get it right all the time. But actually, I'm much happier and more content and more lovely to be around. Still grumpy sometimes, just not like, as much anymore. But it's when we try and fit into this mold of what we think we're meant to be like, it's not good for us. It's just an absolute disaster.
Is that kind of the process of becoming a Youier, in your opinion?
Yes, I think so. I think for becoming Youier is about, I think for me, I believe it starts with that love piece, because you can't, and this is where not all of your listeners are going to agree with me, but I mean, the people that I tend to work with in the Itchy Soul Playground, they are people that have a relationship with God. And so I believe it starts with knowing that you are loved. And so a lot of the stuff that I share on social media is about sharing God's heart for people, how loved they are by him. And because you can't dig into being Youier and exploring who it is that he made you to be if you don't trust him. Because we, as churchy people, we say, oh yeah, I love God, but do I really trust that he's got my back? Or, or is he going to be like a naughty school kid sticking his foot out trying to trip me up? Because if it's that God that I'm doing life with, I can't trust him. That would be an absolute disaster. But so for me, being Youier starts with those radical encounters with God's love. And then once you know how loved you are and whose you are, then we go on a journey. Okay, so who does God say I am? What does that look like? And then so we do that for the work that I do. We have a membership area. It's a playground where we do community, and we have resources, and we do teaching and training, and we do life together in community and ask questions and love each other, even as we're figuring out, okay, well, what does that look like? So one of the things we do in Romans 12, and there's the motivational gifts which are given to people, everybody, not just like churchy people, everybody is given gifts by God. Okay, so of these gifts, which gift have I got? What does that mean? How does that show up in my life? It's a journey, but yeah, it starts with that love piece for sure.
Well, I think that's phenomenal. And I think that is a piece that's really missing. There's a lot of people say, well, I'm not really so into that religious. I can't imagine going to anybody to talk about me. Mm-hmm. That would put all the psychologists, psychiatrists, and social workers out of business overnight, if that's true. The problem is they do go there, because they say, well, I don't know where else to go. But it doesn't matter, because what you're describing to me, and disclosure, 37 years psychologist. But the thing is, it's all about helping people do the inside work
Totally.
so that the way they reflect out to the outside world is exactly who they are. And they have all the joys and happiness that they're deserving to have, and they're not sabotaging it anymore.
Yeah.
And so do you want to go to something that's relatively free, or do you want to pay 125 pounds an hour, to have a 50-minute session with a guy who really doesn't care? He's just going to take notes. And it's just going to fire back the questions or responses that you've asked them already, and until you disclose it for yourself. So it's either way. I think people believe, they just don't know what they believe, or they're afraid to say, I believe. But the outcomes are projected to be the same without maybe all the benefits.
But I do think the missing piece, even within like Christian circles, is I don't think we give enough credence to the relationship that we have with Holy Spirit. Like if you're a believer, you've got God living inside of you, and so therefore, why are we trying to sit around? We think we're figuring out on our own with our notebooks. And the reality is that's still God whispering to us. People who people who say they don't believe in God, those thoughts that pop in your head, some of those are going to be God. God is, because if we believe that God loves the world, which we're told he does, he is nudging and whispering and guiding everybody into relationship with him. Well, that gives me goosebumps. But he is, though. He's guiding everybody into relationship because it's all about love. And so for me, I get the opportunity, because of the people that I work with, I get to be quite loud and proud about it. Like I don't have to I could just talk it out loud and say. But the missing piece I see is we read all these books and we take all these quizzes. Yes, it's good to have knowledge. And so when I learned about the motivational gifts and realized that I was an exhorter or an encourager, it was like, oh, okay, that makes so much sense. And there's been loads of really good studying work done by the teachers and the researchers that I get to benefit from and glean from. But the missing piece, I think, is that we leave God out of the equation. We don't go, okay, I'm reading this. Show me what this looks like. So, for example, I did this literally just last night. I'm a bit of a talker. This may not have escaped your attention. And sometimes the people who live with me find that they say I talk too much, right? And so I do have this tendency to get a bit apologetic, not so much in this context, because you invited me to come and talk to you, so that's delightful. But within the context of, say, like on Voxer, and I'm having a conversation with somebody, if I'm not careful, I'll almost be apologetic for speaking too much. And one of my friends called me out on it yesterday, like, why are you saying sorry? I love to hear from you. I'm like, okay. So I asked God, why am I being apologetic about this? And so he and I had this whole, like, I do a lot of journaling and writing with him. So that's how he and I do a lot of, talking. So talking doesn't necessarily mean words with him. So we did explore that. And so through that process, it was kind of what you psychologists would do. Okay, what are the lies I'm believing here? What's actually going on here? Because don't forget, of course, that all of the training that people have, the psychiatrists, the psychologists, the social workers, all the people you listed, that wisdom, where do you think that came from? We as scientists, and we're learning more about the human body and the mind, the neuroplasticity, the way that, all of that stuff, God created all that stuff first. And so I find it really exciting when we realize that things are lining up, and scientists go, oh, wow. Even the scientists who don't want to acknowledge that God did all that stuff, he's giving them that wisdom, and we can benefit from that. I think I went off on a tangent, but I don't know.
It's okay. It's okay. You're a very interesting person, Elle. How can people contact you? Because really, you've given an awful lot of gold nuggets. I'm sure there's people sitting in there, oh, this is God stuff, I'm not interested. But really, if you're a business person, set some of the language aside and pick up the golden nuggets, because there's been thousands of them tossed out in this show. And that's what we're all about. Gary's Board's Golden Nuggets is about success leaves clues. We have a successful person here who's been dropping clues left and right towards how you get successful. You may not want to accept that word God, but like Alan Watts says, doesn't matter what you call water, when you fall in it, you still get wet. So we're just going to be sitting there. So how would people who would be interested in knowing more contact you?
Well, before I answer that question, which I will in a second, I agree with you. I just want to say I agree with you totally about how you can glean from stuff. One of my close friends is an atheist. She says she doesn't believe in God at all, but I used to send out these daily emails every single day. And she'd get them. And they mentioned God all over the place. And she said, it's fine. I just sort of like read over that bit. And so I think what I would encourage your listeners to do, although if they've got this far, one would assume they've already done it, go back and listen. And if you need to, skip over the bits that kind of don't quite, that bump up against you. Or if you're really brave, you can sort of like dig into the bits that bump up to you and say, well, okay, well, what's to learn there? But all that to say, I agree with you totally. We don't need to get hung up on semantics. In terms of finding out more, my website is youier.com. I know that Americans and Canadians have a real problem with Youier, so I'm going to spell it for you. It's Youier. Youier.com is where you can find out more about me. I am also on Instagram, Ms. L. Edwards on Instagram. I have a Facebook page as well. I'm currently I'm in negotiations with Facebook trying to get the username changed, so I'm not going to give you that one. But if you go onto Facebook and just search L. Edwards Youier, you'll probably find me. But yeah, Instagram is probably one of the other ones if you want like a social platform.
We'll have all that information in the show notes, ladies and gentlemen. I give everybody 2 minutes to say whatever they want to say. Your time starts.
I was actually asking Holy Spirit about this yesterday. I said, well, what do you want me to say? Because I know probably, full transparency, I haven't watched all your episodes, but I imagine this is the bit where people usually promote stuff. But I feel like actually we've been talking about so much of the stuff that I get excited about. I've got nothing to promote. Instead, I said, God, what do you want to share with the people? And this is what he said. He said, he wanted me to share with you that he loves you. Even if that man, I'm reading this off my notes because I don't want to misquote him. He says, even if the idea of God loving you makes you feel uncomfortable or you don't believe that to be true, it's time to consider that maybe your picture of who God is and how he wants to be known could do with an overhaul. So that is the thing that took less than 2 minutes, because I haven't got a timer running and I tend to be a bit wordy, is for those people who that word God brings up loads of angst, right? Dig into that. What is that about? And like I say, maybe it's time to give your picture of God an overhaul, because God is love and he is loving on every single person listening, even if they don't yet let him love them. He is still loving on you. So sorry, folks, you can't do anything about that. You can't make him stop. He's God. He just loves you anyway.
Thank you so much, Elle. I appreciate that. Ladies and gentlemen, that will conclude this episode. If you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing and sharing these episodes with people you know that would really appreciate them. Thank you so much, Elle, for your time.
My pleasure.
I really appreciate it. I'm so glad I got you in. Bye.